A months-long KCTV5 investigation exposes a famous Comic-Con writer accused by dozens of women of sexual assault. Jai Nitz has been the subject of multiple police investigations in both Kansas City and Lawrence, but he's never been arrested or charged. And the victims tell KCTV5 that is the tragedy in this story. Law enforcement and prosecutors failing to do their job, putting other women in danger. We want to warn you, some of what you're about to hear includes graphic details of sexual assault. And some of the women asked us to conceal their identity because they are still afraid of the man they say attacked them. This is comic book writer Jai Nitz. He's famous for creating the comic book character El Diablo, who you might recognize from the movie Suicide Squad. Just this spring, one of his alleged victims decided she couldn't keep quiet anymore.
He pulled me in for a hug. His arms were fully wrapped around me, and he's twice my size. It's really intimidating to feel like boxed in like that, like you can't move. And he put his thigh to me, and I could feel that he was erect.
Hannah Strader is describing the night she says she was sexually assaulted by Jai Nitz.
I got in my car, and he was standing there as I opened the door. He called my name, and out of reflex, I looked up, and he forced his mouth onto mine in a moment that I wasn't expecting it at all.
Hannah first met Nitz when he came to her KU journalism class as a guest speaker. She says she told her journalism professor about that night, and he told her he'd report it to the university.
I received an email from the Title IX office, and I went down and talked to the director and told him my story. The School of Journalism has informed me that they're not going to invite him back, but that didn't apply to the entire campus. And he's been on campus since as guests of student organizations.
It was nearly 2 years later, Hannah posted online about what happened in an article titled, "Assault Isn't Always Obvious. Here's my story."
I feel privileged in a lot of ways that I had a quote-unquote mild experience that I am able to share and talk about when so many of these other girls don't.
She'd never publicly named Nitz until posting that story back in March.
My number one concern, even coming forward with the story, was always finding other girls.
But says she was angry. She'd heard Nitz was going to the Comic-Con in Kansas City that week.
And in a moment of just pure anger, I was like, well, I'll do it. And then the next morning, he was not at Comic-Con. He left for a family emergency.
Within 24 hours, Hannah heard from 10 women, all accusing Nitz of sexual assault.
At some point, this behavior has to stop, and it's been going on far too long.
3 of those women sat down with KCTV5, detailing being sexually assaulted by Nitz, including one woman who fears Nitz will hurt her again if he finds out she's going public. She'd met Nitz in a Kansas City bar.
But I was leaving, I was going to my vehicle. I also didn't know he was right behind me. He grabbed me by the neck and forced me into his car.
For the next 45 minutes, she says Nitz raped and sodomized her.
I was crying, and I'm crying and saying, please don't. But that kind of seemed to just egg him on. At one point, I stopped crying, and in the time during and after, you're kind of just in survival mode of, if I fight, does it get worse? If I'm going to die, I have to make peace.
Did you think that was possible, that you might die?
Yeah, definitely towards the end, I kind of, I had a moment of if I'm going to die, this is the moment it's going to happen.
She filed a police report after reading Hannah's story and hearing other women's stories.
He took me to somewhere pretty much out in the middle of nowhere.
Do you feel like you were raped at that point?
Yeah. So far in this group of women, we've met and talked to almost 30 women. Yeah.
When anybody puts their body or their limbs on you to restrain you, especially in the case of people who feel physically weaker than somebody, it's terrifying.
I don't personally feel empowered by this. I feel guilty for not having said something sooner. I think when you're in a profession or community like comics, And your interaction is with a lot of different people, with a lot of them being sometimes younger and female and impressionable, looking to potentially move into a career like that. If you have somebody being predatory, somebody who has power in a convention should be taking some sort of action to restrict somebody being predatory.
Multiple women are now considering civil action against NITS.
If one person says it, well, maybe that's an aberration, but if 2 or 3 or 4 people are saying it, or a whole chorus of people saying the exact same thing, it becomes harder not to believe what's happening.
Attorney Lauren Sierra is representing 3 women.
In these types of situations where it's someone who has some celebrity status, they are often associated with businesses, well-known companies, comic books, Comic-Con, and unfortunately, we've just seen a lot of people aware of this behavior, but they, for whatever reason, look the other way, whether it's financially motivated. So if we can go forward with a civil case, we're hoping that it can hold these companies, the universities, et cetera, accountable, so they will stop facilitating this person to be able to act against these women.
Since we first met these women, the Jackson County DA declined to file charges, and in Lawrence, police emailed Hannah telling her NITS wouldn't talk to them, so unless she contacted NITS again, they couldn't go forward. NITS declined our request for an interview. And Dark Horse Comics tells KCTV5 it, quote, suspended all professional ties with NITS in April 2019, and at this time there are no plans to do business with him in the future. Dark Horse Comics published NITS' comic book Astro Hustle, but canceled the 2nd issue of the comic book after learning of sexual assault allegations against NITS.